Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a chess show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have a guest, Professor Ken Regan. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on again. Welcome to my office.
Always my pleasure. And we have a lot of things happening or just finished very recently that we haven't discussed yet. So
Well, we had
try today.
the the very interesting ending of the FIDE Grand Swiss on
Yes, of
Monday,
course. Yeah.
where there were two candidates' places at stake in the open section and in the women's section. And in the open section, Anish Giri beat Hans Niemann in the last round to secure one of the two places, and then Matthias Bluebaum won a huge tiebreak.
That's probably his best chess achievement.
That is, yes.
Time.
Giri too. Giri scored an undefeated 8 out of 11, and there was a big tie on 7.5, 3.5 for the remaining candidates' place. In the women's section, Vaishali Ramesh Babu did come through despite the hiccup of losing to Bibisara Asabayeva.
Yes.
And she was joined by Katerina Lagno, and there it was outright, no tiebreak needed. They tied first with 8 each, and then their nearest pursuers had 7.5. And there's actually an interesting point about the tiebreak system. So the tiebreak system was based upon the average of the opponent's rating dropping one low player. Okay. So it was therefore 10 out of the 11 opponents' average rating. And that had some good and bad effects. The main good effect is that the tiebreak positioning was known coming into the final round. So now, are you seeing a list of people in the women's section?
No, I don't see it.
Let's see if let's see. It's my screen. Yes, see how long it takes the screen share to come.
Okay. It's very hard to see, of course. But
Let me enlarge the.
okay. Okay,
list.
it's getting better.
Okay, so a lot of the games in the last round were drawn. So Vaishali and Katerina knew coming in that they needed to draw because they could not actually have been caught, because the highest tiebreak was 24-61, really high tiebreak by Olivia Fatalieva.
Mhm.
But she was a full point behind, so she could not catch them even with a victory. She drew her last game. The one person who ordinarily you'd expect could have caught them, or any one of these three, but I'll focus on Bibisara Asabayeva because she was tied for first at some point. She drew her last game, and it's a game I will show. But even had she won, her tie break would have been 8 and 9 points less than Vaishali and Lagno.
Yep.
So the benefit of this tie-break system is that you know what you have to do. And we'll see that in the men's section, the open section. But on the other hand, it does take some of the drama out. So the game I'm going to show first would have been a much more dramatic game if a candidate's place had been at stake for it. Anyway, great victory for Vaishali, who was tremendously underrated. All the women are coming into the tournament. And this is the situation with the women's candidates. So, incidentally, Divya Deshmukh qualified for the candidates by virtue of winning the Women's World Cup, and Alexandra Goryachkina had already qualified. So she also played in the open section. That was only fair, not clutter up the women's section. And Bibisara is on the bubble. Okay, she has 2 ways she can qualify. Well, it's done by points. Actually, so it's actually 1 way you can qualify. She has a 13-point lead almost over the next pursuer, and that's reasonably sizable, considering these are the points at stake. So, well, it's true. If Zhu Wenjun were to win the women's blitz and rapid. No, let's see. Um, yeah, good question. I'm not sure how what is being shown here. She might be able to nip ahead if Asabayeva places out, but also Bibisara has a very good standing in the women's Grand Prix, so it's likely that she's going to qualify anyway. So that also takes some of the impetus out of the game that I'm going to show. But this is an interesting example of if you were really playing for a win, of how a game can wind up not being won. Okay, he was playing Anna Muzychuk. Okay, I think highest rated player in the tournament, and who really had a high performance as well, at least by my metrics. So of course Joko Piano, but actually the open Joko Piano. Looks like it might happen, except white plays D3, not D4. So we're back in the closed Joko Piano lines that we know, and Bibisara goes for the early queenside attack. And black has two choices: to lay back with A6 or confront white with A5 in this particular position. Maybe A5 is better. The engine is perfectly happy with black's position, says that white has to do B5 even to avoid falling a little behind. And now black actually has also broken pins on the king side. So I'm actually fairly happy with this line for black. But white can do a slow build-up, and it's possible that the bishop G4 move isn't such a great idea. Anyway, white plays bishop B3. The computer judges that a little slow, and now thinks that black can attack on the king side with knight G6, knight F4. But that's not what Anna Muzychuk did. Anna Muzychuk is contesting the queen side and making a cubbyhole for her bishop, so would not have been either forced to the bad square A7 or traded off for white's knight. Okay, now white puts a latent pin in, but white is already castled, so it's therefore legal for black to play G5 here. Okay, not have to fear an attack backed by white's rook on H1. Okay, but white still has achieved something out of the opening, and black has some weak squares and some disarray in the camp. So white can be very happy. Black plays D5, so at least black has closed the center, and we're actually already seeing some of the theme of the game take shape. White can't break on the queen side. The queen side's been resolved. The king side, black has advanced. Maybe black can resolve the king side. However, white has more of an attack on the D5 pawn than black can ever hope to get on the D4 pawn. So white certainly has an important initiative, even if black overprotects the D5 pawn. So here we go. We trade. Now, white also has weak squares to play against on the king side, temporarily at least, that force black to capture white's knight. King G7 would have been too exposed. And now, however, this creates another feature of the position. We have a white square lock on the king side, and white has a light squared bishop. So black has definite fortress potential in this position. And that ultimately becomes the story of the game, even though white certainly should have won. Okay, so we maneuver. So this position, things haven't changed. The computer still sees white over half a pawn ahead. So white clearly has to go about winning the game somehow. Black can get a little bit of counterplay, and black is dreaming of counterplay with F5, but this was mistimed, and now white has. Now white should be winning. White is going to win a pawn on the queen side and should be able to resist whatever attack black seems to be trying to mount. Okay, so knight e5, nice incisive move. Okay, so now here white should have played queen e3 and kept attacking chances against black's king. But anyway, this isn't bad either. White still has a very substantial advantage. Now black puts a knight on d6. This is a key to maintaining a blockade. And in fact, white would have been better advised to play more of a build-up, create some more threats on the king side first, okay, by moving the king off, connecting the rook to the h1 square, advancing the king, because white's king can become active more easily than black's. So although d5 looks like a dominating square, it gets in the way of certain things. Okay, so white creates this. I won't criticize b6 too harshly because it fixes the queen side. Okay. Anyway, okay, so white's a pawn ahead, although it's kind of a little bit of a damaged pawn. White still has to go about the task of winning this position, but that's not what Bibisara does. Okay, well, Bibisara attacks this, now comes over here. Okay, so it looks logical. White is going to win that pawn. Now, white is winning this game, but winning that pawn is not the way to win this game. So it seems like, so white now has the biggest advantage, according to the computer, that white has had this entire game. But if you want to win the pawn, you should win the pawn in a way that does not trade off the rooks. So you can maneuver your bishop to c6 and then win the pawn. Or, as the computer is now suggesting, you can go there and take it with the bishop. But Bibisara triumphantly captured the pawn, is now 2 pawns ahead. But now the position is dead drawn. This is a fortress. I don't think even a computer could win this as white. Although, and this computer does realize that white is no longer winning. And we play just a few more moves before Bibisara realizes that there are various ways that black can execute a blockade, even 2 pawns down. And so after some more moving around, Bibisara gave up trying.
What about f4? Would it gain anything?
What's that?
If you would play f4, even in this position.
Black can ignore it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. And g4, maybe black can counterattack on g4 too. So
yeah, that's true.
So total block, no way to make progress. Well, said this, all of the games on these boards were all drawn and played very carefully played by Vaishali and Lagno, who knew that obviously they needed to draw it to earn their spots. Okay, now let me go over to the open section and again show the results. And again, draw, but Anish Giri beat Hans Niemann on the first board. So he qualified, and then there was this 3-way tie. 2 up-and-coming people from Germany, Keimer, who was more fancifully favored, a rating over 2750 and 80 points, 90 points higher than 80 points higher than Bluebaum. But then also Alireza Firouzja of France, previously of Iran, has played in the candidates before. And so there's also the mystery of why didn't Firouzja qualify. But I'm going to tell a story, first Giri, and then between Bluebaum and Keimer. Okay, so Giri won by defeating Hans Niemann. Okay, so Hans Niemann was in contention. If he had won, he would have had a place in the candidates. But as was known from the tie breaks again, so I think I can show the tie breaks here. Oh, wait, the results table. Where is the tie break? Let's see, rating. That's the players' rating. Oh, it's not as nice a table as I found for the women. It was known that a draw would not do it for Niemann. So Niemann had to go all out. Okay, so coming into the last round, it was known that the best person with the best tiebreak was Bluebaum. So he was the only one who could be confident that a draw at 7.5 would win him the second place. So Niemann knew he had to win, and Giri actually also knew he had to win because Giri did not have the second base tiebreak. So both players needed to win, and we'll see now how Neiman, with the onus as black especially, to create an unbalanced game, tried to do so, but the highly professional way in which Geary maneuvered him into a position where only Geary had winning chances. So, okay, so unbalanced English opening. And black plays, Nimzo style, except white hasn't played, moved the D pawn, and captures right away. So now plays with the queen. White plays A3 to stop incursions. Black plays D5. White plays D4. Maybe E4. So he takes D4 as best move, or you can take with the knight first. Oddly enough, because if E takes D4, then E takes D4 check is painful. E4 leads to a disadvantage according to the computer, but anyway, this ought to be enterprise. White couldn't take back but the E pawn because of the pin, but black captures anyway. Now it looks like black is getting some play in the center, but now when white's queen goes to H4, it creates a magnetic tractor beam to trade those queens. And it's hard to tell how black could only really taking on C4, giving white a tempo, is the one way that black could avoid an early trade of queens. Instead, Neiman played bishop E6, captures, and now the trade of queens is bound to happen. White actually gave check first. Okay, and this is the position. The computer shows a almost half pawn advantage for white. And we've reached a position where only white can dream to win. White has the two bishops against bishop and knight. And white does not have any targets for black to attack. The only thing black could really hope to do is use the queenside majority, but that's not very well escorted by a knight, and it's just not likely to succeed. So anyway, so white does a slow buildup. Black tries to respond in kind, but we're going to see that white is also has an extra tempo to take over squares, even though it takes a while for white to develop the bishop. Okay, now white is a better center. All right, black can maybe establish a knight on D4, but we're going to stop that. So Neiman goes over here, really fishing for play. I think hoping to get in C4 and knight B3. And this is the one misstep, according to the computer. Computer already sees white as almost a pawn advantage with the natural rook AC1. So three-quarters of pawn advantage. Or white can advance in the center right away. So this cuts down, but does not really remove white's advantage. And after Neiman's, so the only move to maybe stamp rook d6 as ill-timed would be to offer the trade of rooks, but then that diminishes black's hopes, small hopes for a win even more. So Neiman played this, and now white is perfectly well going on again. Neiman decided not to play rook c4, to play the c4 move, which you would think that he was gunning for. Let's just see why it's bad. No, it's not bad. It just probably best to say it's just ineffective. So black has this play, but now what? Now black has a weak c pawn and can't advance the other two queenside pawns because white's bishop on e3, which black opened, is raking them. So there really isn't anything for black to do here. Anyways, black moved the knight back and players repeated moves. And then Geary realized, okay, no, I don't want to repeat moves. I'll go back there. And now the natural rook ac1. And king e7, it's very easy to lose these positions with natural moves. So right now, trades off rooks, and white now is beginning a very effective attack. So this position probably should now be judged winning for white. And the reason is that black's queenside majority is so corralled that white is essentially operating with an extra pawn. An extra pawn plus two bishops has to be a decisive advantage. Okay, so now a little petite combination of the kind that you can get Black should, of course, recapture with the knight, and then can live to fight another day. White can't win a pawn because of the latent attack on the bishop on a6. But Niemann recaptured with the pawn, and now White does win a pawn for real. Okay, we give up the two bishops, but to create an endgame where the bishops are the same color. And maybe Black can put up a better fight by adopting some of the dark square fortress ideas of the previous game with h6. And after h6, actually, White needs to break Black up by g5. If White plays a natural move like the king move, then let's see, can Black play g5 right away? No. Okay, so now I'm talking through my head. Probably there's a threat that Black has to resolve first. But anyway, okay. Black played king d7 instead, forcing White to capture. And now White gets in the move g5 to prevent any idea of a dark square blockade on the king side. And now White is very clearly winning. The engine shows that. And Black tries to get a little counterplay, but White is simply able to say, "Hey, Black, your move. What are you doing?" White is just going to play a5, advance the pawns. So let's actually see the line that at least keeps White's king from infiltrating. So a5, h6, bishop f1. Okay, bishop c8, bishop e2. Looks like we're shadow boxing here, but eventually White is going to position pieces. Oh, I don't know why Black had to play that. Let's play the bishop to e6. And now bishop a4. We're solely going to run Black out of squares by which to prevent White's king from coming into f5. Bishop e8. And then if Black keeps on going like this, then bishop h5. And now you see the plan. White is going to play bishop g4, kick Black off the diagonal, and advance and win Black's f-pawn. Okay. So Niemann tried this instead, but then realized, looking ahead at lines like this, that he had to bring his king back. But now White's king has taken over the center, and Niemann gave up.
Wow.
So very expertly played by Giri.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Okay, so last game I'm going to show is the game from round 10 that really ultimately decided the candidate spot. The two players, Keimer and Bluebaum, facing off against each other. Keimer with the advantage of the white pieces. And this was, more strategic opening. White builds slowly, doesn't play d4, and plays knight c3 instead of earlier advance of the c pawn. Okay, so definitely hyper modern start by White. But okay, unbalanced position, winning chances, and chances of attacking on the king side. Okay, White's play from here on now is very nice. White is going to develop and resolve the pawn position. Now, this is actually a curious move, but it has ambitions on both sides of the board, as we'll see. E5, and so now we've unsheathed White's bishop before Black could play bishop b7. Okay, so Black plays bishop a6 instead, and rook c8. Okay, so we've got things developed, but now White is able to knock Black's knight back, and White has better control of the center in this position, and has also avoided a queen trade by placing the knight on d2. So White's queen makes a foray. Black got the bishop to b7, but of course lots of tempi, and now White has the sights set on Black's king. I always loved attacking with a pawn on e5 when I played. So, okay, so we're going to bring White's pieces to put pressure on Black, and it's very difficult to defend this kind of position. So Black puts his queen on the wrong square, and okay, so instead of that, knight g5 was better. Would have forced a disadvantaged trade. Anyway, bishop g5 looks natural too. The only thing is that now the queens have come off, but White is actually left with a much better pawn structure after this move. So actually, White's advantage is still about a pawn. I don't know why the computer gave a question mark. Okay, so now it said White is attacking on both sides of the board. This is really masterful conduct of this game by White. Okay, now regrouping, getting rid of the light squared bishops is a bonus for White because Black is now impeded by the pawn on c5, which White can attack a lot. But Black does get a counterattack. Okay, Black gets counterattack, but White gets an attack. And here we come. We are putting pressure on Black. We're winning the pawn on c5. Black may make some slips, but we're going to come now to the critical moment in the game. Okay, so White now White is winning stuff. Okay, won that. We defend that. We just have to make sure Black doesn't get a queen. That's okay. We make sure Black doesn't get a queen. And what we're going to do is we're going to trade the c pawn for the b pawn. And that will eliminate Black's eliminate the big problem. And now we've got this may be objectively drawn or objectively winning. It's hard to tell. I think it's actually objectively winning, but requires some care. Black's pawns are split and weak. If move Black's pawn to f6 from e5, and then it's a very clear draw. But the way things are exposes Black's h pawn to attack. Okay. Okay. So we come now to the critical juncture. White checks, and now. So Black has just one threat in this position. And White can win by taking care of the threat. Knight e4 is one way. Getting Black's rook off the 7th rank with rook d6 check is another way. Rook b6 check. King f1, maybe not efficacious. But Keimer, still with lots of time on the clock, played rook h7. And this gives away White's advantage. Black has knight takes g3.
Very clever.
With the obvious point being that if the king takes, rook d3 check picks up the knight. So White is able to win a pawn, but the reality of this position and the position in which they agree to draw is that even if Black's e-pawn disappears, this is the theoretically drawn f and h pawn ending. So draw, nothing to do, no victory, and ultimately not a candidate spot here for Keimer.
Well, he's still young, and maybe he will even make it to this candidates tournament.
Yep. Meanwhile, Bluebaum did not even have a trainer, so we'll see how much he's able to improve with training now that he has some really serious chess to prepare for.
Yeah.
So, interesting times.
Very interesting time. Ken, thank you so much for today's program, and looking forward to see you next week someplace, same time.
All right.
Great weekend.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.